Hey y'all, Mimi's back. She's back.
Yay!
I told a lot of people about you last time we talked, which was a while ago.
You are like my number one fan, and that makes me so happy.
Listen, thank you. But actually I already have the title for this episode, and it's called Funny in Real Life.
Ooh, I love that.
Isn't that good?
It is good.
I find a lot of comedians are not very funny in real life. Honestly, I know I talked about this before, but I'm doubling down on it. I don't know, it's weird to me. And but I found our last interaction like this. I was telling my wife, I was like, I've interviewed a lot of comedians, and most of them just, I feel like it's a performance on the stage. And then the person I meet, I'm like, who am I speaking to? Like, I'm
Mhm.
like, this is a performance. Oh, I didn't get that, you know?
Bit of multiple personalities there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, comedy is an interesting thing. But speaking of that, so where are we at with your comedy? What's going on in the life of Mimi?
Oh boy. So, comedy's been a little slow lately because my
Mm,
health has been a bit on the fritz. Um, from our
hmm.
previous episode that I had a brain hemorrhage in 2014. Supposedly, lightning is only supposed to strike once, but in my case, twice. In January, I had found that I had a new brain hemorrhage in the
Mm.
same spot as the first time. So that has changed a lot, in the past few months.
I would imagine so. I mean, um, how has that affected your comedy or your writing, just getting out there and speaking, you know?
Yeah, so I moved out of LA. I'm
Oh,
back in
really?
Colorado. Yeah, I'm back in Colorado at the moment. That had less to do with my health and more to do with just running out of money. So, I did that and I'm back with mom and dad, but I was a couple days from moving and I had scheduled a CT scan because I'd had this huge migraine in November.
Yeah.
And I was like, we should probably just check this out, see what's going on. And I'm like, it's fine. I'll just pop in the scanner. We'll check it out. It'll be fine. And then I'll just go on my merry way and move, from LA back to Colorado and hospitalized for 2 days.
Yeah.
So the question you asked was, how has this impacted my writing and my comedy? I would say it's giving me well, it's definitely reignited my trauma response. And
Mm.
so that's given me a lot to write about. And I remember when this happened the first time, and I was writing to kind of try to understand what was happening to me. And so that's been happening. Again, I'm writing a second book. I've been writing a second book for a few years, and I wasn't intending to include like a new brain hemorrhage in the mix, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, life is funny. So I've been, just trying to work through a lot of those emotions that I don't think I dealt with last time. Last time I was like, I'm just gonna like not have a brain injury. Like I'm just gonna pretend it's not real, make fun of it, like not cope in any kind of healthy way. So now that we're going through it a second time, I'm like, oh, okay, I actually have to do that.
Yeah. You might want to do that, Mimi. I mean,
Just maybe, just maybe. So I haven't been on stage in a couple of months since the diagnosis. However, being back in Denver, I just got into the Denver Fringe Festival
hmm.
this summer, so I'll be putting on my first show, the one that's about the original, the OG Brain Bleed.
The OG Jay Brennan is the new book. I have a hole in my head again. Is that like,
Everyone's been saying that. They're like, well, obviously that's the title.
of
I'm like,
course.
well, all right.
Like I want to like, let's not go there, guys.
Yeah, so I've been writing a lot more than I think I usually did because I'm not working.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of in a trying to get my health back in line. My parents are being great and just kind of taking care of me, and I'm in their new awesome, we're going to retire at some point in our lives. This is our fancy house.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like just living in their bougie, bougie house, writing and trying to, get a handle on my health. So that's
Yeah. Now you said this summer you're performing at this festival, or
yes.
right? Didn't I text you that I'm moving to Colorado? I told you that, right?
I think you did.
Yeah, I'm moving to Colorado.
Well, then let's hang out. You can come see
Yes,
my show.
I want to come. That's what I was saying. I want to come see your show, and because I'm going to be like the Fort Collins area. Now I get to see Mimi live.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Then I could
Yeah,
judge you
you can
completely.
judge me. You can write a scathing, hateful review. Uh,
I'm just gonna secretly back and just record and be like, "This is a great podcast episode of me."
when are you moving?
uh, Hopefully June. I'm trying to sell my house right now, but it's a crazy market out there. Very
Oh
crazy,
God, yeah, wow.
insane, actually. But either way, we're heading there. Regardless, we're gonna be heading. I'm really looking forward to it because I know so many people in Colorado because of the podcast.
Mhm.
So actually, I'm looking forward to doing a lot of in-person episodes. And like you and I should do an in-person episode.
Yes.
I think it's going to be amazing. But I wanted to ask you because I feel like comedy is in an interesting place right now.
Hmm.
Before I launch into it, where do you think comedy is currently in kind of the pop culture and this cultural aspect of things? And is it good or bad?
Mm. I think it's just kind of an awakening of sorts. Like I think we're in that period of like the culture is changing. Things that we said years before that
Yeah.
people laugh at, they're like, actually, that's really messed up.
Mm,
You know? And so there's some of that happening. And yes, on both sides of the aisle, you've got people saying, it's gone too far. You can't say anything.
mm,
Comedy is going to die because you can't even make any joke about anything anymore. I don't think that that's true. I also don't, I'm not also on the other extreme where it's like, um, that you can't tell jokes, right? So I think there's a reckoning happening. There are a lot of comedians that are like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And a lot of them are responding to the things in culture and trying to get a handle on some of this. I mean, I've always had a struggle of my own comedy in trying to make something that is not funny, objectively funny. And so early on, I would have other comedians saying, you should just tell like normal, quote unquote, normal jokes,
mm,
this brain stuff, like nobody can relate to that. Well, it's like,
mm.
spoiler alert, I know more people with brain injuries than without brain injuries at this point. Whatever.
Right.
So I got a lot of that pushback just personally. But yeah, it is an interesting era. It's an interesting place. What are we allowed to joke about? What are we not allowed to joke about? I don't know. I know what I feel comfortable saying and what I don't feel comfortable saying. I know how I feel in a crowd when someone says something and I go, oh, you know what? I didn't like that.
Mm,
And that is me. That's a me thing. Everyone has their own kind of gray area, what have you, of what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Um, and also we can't judge things based off of just the celebrity comedians. Like
mm.
there are local comedians, and Denver's a great scene. Fort
Okay.
Collins, actually, they just opened up, I say just, but probably like 5 years ago now.
Was this your
Because
timeline for things for recent? Oh, just, It's like,
yesterday 10 years. So the Comedy Fort is in Fort Collins. That's a really good place.
okay.
But anyway, um locally, like in our pockets of our communities, we're having conversations about like, oh, like that was too far, or oh, that was great, cutting edge stuff you're doing, like
Yeah.
there's just all that stuff you can't really gauge based off of what you're seeing on like TV and news and stuff like that.
That's interesting. So, I mean, what is the crowd reaction to comedy that you've seen in kind of the local circles and things in LA where you were, you know?
LA was weird because I was doing some weird stuff in LA.
Really? Like what?
I was doing clowning, which is not what you would think, or what I think you would think about clowning, which is red nose and face paint and balloon animals. That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Clowning is kind of this alternative comedy that's actually very historied, goes back to France, 300 years ago. Miming is a bit of clowning. Charlie Chaplin is certainly a clown. Some of that physical
Okay.
comedy. And essentially, the whole idea there is like failing on purpose. Whereas,
What?
yes, whereas a stand up is going to sit there and go, I'm Mr. Cool, Mrs. Cool, with the microphone making you laugh because I said something really profound or smart or whatever. Whereas clowning is more like, I'm going to fall on my face and look like a complete idiot. And actually, I took a class called the Idiot Workshop.
What?
Yes, it was really fun. And it was kind of all about just finding like my idiot, like what is the characterization that I choose to bring on stage that is off center, right? Strange, different, weird. And it turns out I think I've been clowning for a long, long time before I knew what it was.
Like it's just me.
So one time I was in LA, I was doing an open mic for my friend, and I said, I'm going to do something really weird. Is that okay? It's not going to be stand up at all. Is that cool? She was like, yeah, do whatever you want. And I just sat there and I messed around with the microphone for 5 minutes. Like I dropped it, I wrapped it around my neck. I like essentially almost broke it. I was just like being a
Yeah.
real idiot up there. I was like, I just want to put this out because I haven't written anything, I don't have, new jokes right now. So I'm just gonna go off of this clowning stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun, and there's some of that like satire. Like I see a lot of people that maybe used to be stand-ups moving towards more alternative clowning, especially in LA. It's pretty popular in LA. Because they're so tired of the restrictions of stand-up,
Hmm.
right? Of the I have to do this, or I have to even like I have to be on the stage. What if I want to hang out in the audience?
What?
And
What's going on here?
yeah.
What?
And get my set, which I was really happy because I got to incorporate some of those things into my newer show that I brought to Edinburgh last year. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah, I would love to talk about this is different for me. I never heard of any of this stuff. But again, I think if you just I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people are tapped into celebrity comedy, right? They're watching the new Netflix special, this and that. By the way, I'm sorry, Chris Rock. I didn't like your special. I'm sorry. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, it felt like he was off. It wasn't
Mm.
the content, it just felt like he wasn't good type of
I
thing.
haven't seen it yet, but I have already heard the waves of, you know,
It just
yeah.
wasn't that good. Like I've loved a lot of his past stand up. This one felt like I hate to say this, almost like he shouldn't have done it. Not
Mm.
because the content, again, there was some funny parts. It's just that like he didn't seem right during it. He seemed uptight and anxious the whole time. It
Now
was
this
weird
was
to
the
me.
live. This was live.
Yeah. Yeah. The live one. And there was some really interesting, he's like one of these people that talks about a lot of commentary going on in society and stuff. I was very interested in his commentary about, attention that, maybe one of the biggest issues in America is attention. People crave attention dramatically.
Mhm.
I thought that was good, but I found myself not being that interested in it. And I was like, I wonder what that is. I mean, maybe
Mm.
got the shit slapped out of him and he's not that funny anymore. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe he's just nervous. Someone's gonna walk up and beat him up.
Right. I mean, people are getting attacked on stages, right? And
Actually, yeah. That's been happening all over. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
all over.
Well, I say that all over, but to celebrities. I mean, I know it also happened to Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
Tried to tackle him.
Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, I've never felt endangered on stage unless it
Hmm.
was by my own doing. And believe me, I have put myself in danger. I think I don't know if I told you this. I fell off my stage one of my first shows at Edinburgh, the first time I did it.
No, you didn't tell me this.
Oh goodness.
You tried to injure yourself?
I don't try. It's just my brain. It's just, I'm a clumsy fool. Like I can't help it, but I usually find some way to bruise myself on
Yeah.
stage. You know, the cord, if you got a cord on your microphone, I'm already like my guard is up,
That
because
seems
I'm like,
dangerous to me.
it's a
Yeah.
tripping hazard right there. Like
Yeah.
no, I've fallen off stages. I've hurt myself. Just by being clumsy. I have to be careful if I'm on someone else's stage that's not familiar, which I always am. It's never like I built my own stage. What? That's not a
Yeah.
thing. But
No. No.
this is my stage. I bring it to every show.
That would be so strange.
It's bubble wrapped and padded for my safety.
Oh, oh gosh.
No, I mean, I think it is really crazy though, the safety aspect of it. You know, oh, and then the comedian, she went viral because somebody threw a beer at her head,
Oh, okay.
and then she's been on. I remember her from New York when I was doing comedy in New York. She's a stand-up,
Yeah.
and I think she was on the road. She wasn't in New York, but she was somewhere. She was opening for somebody. Somebody threw a beer at her head. She picked it up and she chugged it.
That's what I
And
would have done.
yeah,
Seriously.
yes,
Yeah.
and so now you'll see her on Conan and Seth Meyers. She's been on every stage essentially since then because it just got so much media attention.
Like backfired for the person throwing it. It's like, well, you just made him more popular. Good job there. So what are you talking about these days? I mean, like in your last stint, and you want, what's kind of how did you come about the content that you're talking about, and what is it?
Yeah. So I went to Edinburgh last August. I took a new show. I had not finished writing the show until about the day before I put it on stage, if that tells you anything about the kind of person that I am.
It does.
But what that show is called 20 Nothing. And that is a reflection on my 20s. So I'm about to be 31, actually. But when this came about, I was like, I've been writing this second book about things that happened in my 20s. Now, those are crazy stories. Those are, living in cities like New York and LA, kind of more broad topics like relationships and loneliness and kind of like being in your 20s. It's very much geared to that demographic, and the kind of struggles that 20 somethings go through. And so when I started writing this new show, I was actually taking this clown class, and originally I had this idea of this old lady character because I am essentially an old lady at heart, but I took on this role of this old woman and I was going to have her find all of these notebooks. And in these notebooks, they're like journals and diaries. They're my notebooks of these stories, these things that happened to me, these, just crazy things. And she opens it up and she gets sucked into it. She gets sucked into the story. Now we can't tell who's telling the story because the young person is there, then the old person. That was the original idea. I scrapped that. I killed off the old lady, okay?
Yeah.
Because it felt like it got in the way. And I had started workshopping this show, and people had told me, people had seen some of the early iterations of parts of the show, and they're like, we just love when you get up in front of us and are vulnerable and you're telling the
Yes.
story. So you don't really need that quirky old lady thing. Like, we love it, we love you, but we just want to see you tell these stories of being in your 20s. So what I ended up doing was more current day me and 20 something me. And so I'm flipping back between this kind of young, exuberant, like, everything's amazing. I'm going to move to New York City. And then this older, wiser, like, all right, good luck with that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, and then something big will happen and younger me will get really devastated, like, oh my God, like I lost this partner. This thing happened. And then older me will, oh, what you need? It's called therapy. You should go to therapy.
Exactly.
So I'm almost like coaching my younger self,
Yeah.
telling her like it's gonna be okay. I know this stuff is very heavy. There's a little bit of the brain injury story in there, but really not much because I have a whole other show about that.
Yeah.
So it's more over just the big picture of like the 20s and if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would it be? And how would you treat your younger self? Would you treat them with, God, you're so stupid for doing that? Or would you be more compassionate and, oh, I know that was so hard, like just kind of embracing them in a way. So it's a really fun show. It was really fun. It was a bit chaotic at the top
Yeah.
because I rearranged it so many different times and I was taking some content from my book. So
Yeah.
that's what I want to do, as like a marketing tactic, is always like align a show that I'm doing with like a book that I'm writing so
Yeah.
that eventually when the book comes out, you can say, oh, go see the show, buy the book after, like
Yeah.
they're going to have a crossover of content, but it's just so different to see it on stage and then to read it, in my book.
When people meet you and they find out you're a comedian, what's the response?
Uh,
You sound put out by this. It's like, uh tell me a
honestly,
joke, clown.
no, really, but actually,
Really?
I would say 8 out of 10 times it's oh, tell me a joke, right? And lately, I mean, I've ranged in like super passive aggressive responses to that. Oh, that'll be $50, please. Thank you. Or like, or actually, you can hear me tell a joke at my show on Saturday,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but I would say the other percentage is people just being interested or, oh,
Yeah.
that's really cool. And where do you perform? And, lately it's been like nowhere. Oh, you've seen me. You saw me 6 months ago. It's like
Yeah.
I haven't performed in the past 3 months, a little bit plus. So it's like there's almost a bit of that, like, oh, are you really a comedian if you don't have like 5 shows this week that I can
Mm.
catch? You know?
I should be able to see you anytime I want.
Uh-huh.
It's funny. I don't know why I just thought about this. It's like people probably think this is a job I'm never going to do, so I'm endlessly curious about it, or they don't feel competitive against like whenever I tell somebody what my profession is, they honestly don't want to hear about it after. They're like, "Oh, okay, you're in fitness. No, I feel self-conscious about that. I'm not going to talk to you." like I'm going to judge them for their
Interesting.
fitness level, and which I literally don't care. I'm just like, you ask me, man. You know,
Yeah. I would say there's also a little bit of that, like, and again, this comes from what we talked about earlier of like celebrity comedy is like
yeah.
all the. So I've been asked, like, oh, what are you in? Like, how do
Mm.
I know? How can you really prove it? Where's your Netflix special, essentially?
Like just everyone gets that. Yeah.
Someone that same conversation, they were like, oh, are you really a comedian or are you just like trying to be a comedian? I
Oh,
was so offended.
wow.
I was like, oh God.
Really?
I was like, well, I've been doing it for 8 years, so I'm pretty sure I'm doing it. Like, what?
Wait, they said that?
Yeah,
Like,
they're like, are you actually a comedian or are you just like trying to be a comedian? And I was like, oh, are you actually a dentist or are you just trying to be a
I
dentist?
play one on TV. It's like, are you? Yes, you know what? You should do that. Are you actually doing this, or you just trying to?
Yeah.
It's pretty
But
offensive, actually.
that just, yeah, it is. It really, I was really put out by that. But again, I just think that comes from, people don't have comedian friends, and so they don't understand that people do. So they're like, oh, if you are that, you must have, TV credits and you must be
Right.
X, Y, Z. And being a comedian is a big umbrella term. You can be a comedian who has a podcast.
Right.
You can be a comedian who is an actor. You could be a comedian who just does theater. It's like there's so many different levels of that. I just use comedian as a blanket because how much do you really want to talk about? Do you really want to know
Yeah.
about all the 12 things I do? Maybe you do, but, you know.
It's got to be an interesting thing at a party to talk about. I would think, I
Yeah.
would definitely be the guy I mean, it would be a podcast for me. I'd be like, oh, interesting. And I would immediately launch into not tell me a joke because I just think that's weird. I'd be like, do a push up for me. Like, I'd be like, wow, how did you get into that? Like, because there's certain jobs you just wonder how people actually come across it. And I think that's what comedians, it's like, how does someone even get interested in this? And then because it seems like a hard profession to actually do well in. I don't know for sure, but it just seems like you have to be very vulnerable. You're putting yourself up there, you're writing something, people are like, yes, no, like,
Mhm. Mhm.
it seems like it's a very vulnerable um industry to be in because you're really putting yourself out there or you're performing, on some level.
Right. And I think that opens up the question of like, what does it look like to be successful as a comedian?
Yes.
And can you call yourself that if you're not like making six figures?
Mm.
Absolutely, yes. I think it's unfair to hold comedians to that standard when, and it is something with, I think, entertainment in general.
Yeah.
The success of it is very based to monetary values.
Right.
So you would never ask, "Oh, how good of a dentist are you?" I'm just
Are you a
dentist.
celebrity dentist or are you like a local dentist?
Oh, I'm sorry. You don't do dentistry for the Kardashians? Well, you really suck.
You cannot be a good dentist.
But with entertainment in any form, it's very tied to, yeah, the accolades and the movement. And what I think is so interesting is that you'll meet like these overnight success comedians. I'm
Mm-hmm.
putting that in full air
Sure.
quotes. They are not overnight successes. They've been doing comedy for 10 plus years, and then something goes viral or something hits, and it's like, oh, this hot new comedian. Where like we're all of us other comedians that know this person, we're like, yeah, they've been in this for forever. Like,
Yeah.
they're a OG over here. So I think that's really interesting. And yes, it's tough to break into it, but at every level you will find pockets of community of people who want to support you and want to hear what you have to say and will just cheer you on at every instance. I mean, I remember doing my bringer shows, which if you don't know what a bringer show is, it's just in comedy, oftentimes in these big cities like New York, they'll book you for a 5 minute slot at a club, but you have to bring your audience. You have to bring, oh God, there's been like 10, yeah, I got to bring 10 people.
Yeah.
Now, I moved to New York. I didn't know anybody. So I'm like, okay, should I ask just random people on the street, like on the subway? Like, how do I get people to come to my show? But that is how they do it, is they have you bring, butts and seats. And so I started kind of whoring out my friends to come to my shows. And if I had a bad set or like the show was really bad because all the comedians were terrible because they weren't vetted based on talent, oh, you can bring 20 people, you're in.
Yeah.
And so I would oftentimes just after the show walk up to them. Now they've spent, 20 bucks on a ticket, and then there's a 2 drink minimum, right? They've really invested in me tonight, and it's bad. And I just after the show just apologize. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so sorry.
It wasn't good. I'm sorry.
But those are the same people that just keep cheering me on, and it's they're just still there for me. And
Yeah.
they can't make it to every single show all the time, but that's not what really matters to me. It's, are you going to be there when I'm really bombing? And are you going to be there when I'm getting the Oscar or whatever? You know,
Yeah.
like there are those friends that are going to be there, and those other comedians who are and community members who are going to be there for you at every stage versus, I do have those friends as well who were never around. Oh, sorry, I can't, every excuse, or they would say they're coming and then last minute text me
Yeah.
sorry all the time, right? And then, oh, I got a TED talk now. Oh my gosh, wow, all this attention, right? Uh, so
People
don't
love
think
attention.
I'm keeping track. Don't think I'm not keeping.
This brain does work. Come on.
It does. At times, it actually can function. Yes.
You know what's interesting is like everyone thinks they're going to be like, or let me rephrase this. It's like you mentioned, like, oh, if you're not at this monetary level or this popularity. But the truth of it is like not everyone is going to be at that level. But like everyone thinks they're going to be at that level. And it's like there's probably some amazing comedians who are very locally oriented that never get big. They may be hilarious. In fact, I've seen a few of them on like I used to go on cruises a lot, and cruise ship comedians, honestly, extremely funny, extreme funny. And there's some of the funniest people that I've never heard of on
Mm-hmm,
these
mm-hmm.
ships, and I'm like, how's this person not huge? And but that's not for everyone. I think people struggle with that. That they're not that person. Like they're not gonna. I mean, you may never be ever reach that level. People struggle with that, I think.
I think they do. I mean, I think it's very clear why a lot of us want that
Of
because it could
course.
be, financial security. It could mean, not having to do these 12 other side hustles so that we can do the thing we love, So I get why a lot of us want to be at those levels. I think it really just depends on like what their goals are because some people just want to get better at comedy
Yeah.
and they just want to be able to even just being confident. I've seen people that I started out with who we both were not confident. And now I see them, I'm going to a one woman show tonight. A woman that I did stand up with in Denver. She's still in Denver, so never left Denver. I mean, she does travel sometimes. She is she's a road comedian, so she'll go out and do tours and stuff. But I've never seen her do a solo show, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm so curious as to how she brings her comedy into more of a one woman hour long performance, right? And that's growth to me. That's a huge deal, and that's cool that she had those aspirations and goals, and now she's doing it. I don't think she's ever been to Edinburgh, but like she could, there's no reason why she couldn't do that festival. So I think it just depends on who you're talking to and what their goals are. Some people also just like doing comedy because they make friends.
Yeah.
I was never like necessarily that person when I started out because I was a high school teacher and I was like, I don't have time for friends. Like I don't even have time to do comedy. I'm just doing it on one Friday night mic. I will not speak to anyone and I will go home and grade papers. Like that was my thing. And some people really recognize like, oh, these people are cool or they are interesting and I like having people around me that are like that. So it's tough to say. I wouldn't say everybody wants, to go and be famous, but it is tempting, of course, because you see these celebrity people and now, a Dave Chappelle or a Chris Rock can be like, "Hey, I want to do this," and nobody will say no to them.
Right.
And there is that temptation as an artist. Oh, if I had this wild idea, I can just call up Netflix or they will call me actually and
Yeah.
ask me what I have. So of course, that's something that, oh, that'd be awesome. Why not?
What do I mean, I assume you have a decent amount of comedian friends or people that you're connected to. What are those conversations like? Okay, this sounds dumb. I know kind of I'm like, oh, I bet you joke a lot. Like it's like, but is the funniness a factor between the friendship?
I think that's a really good question, actually. I would say most of my close friends are not comedians.
Mm-hmm.
I am, connected to a lot of them. I will also say I've developed a lot of like trench trench warfare friends. during festival season when you're
Mm-hmm.
in Edinburgh and you're performing every single day. And I would have a great friend, Gabe Malika. He's based out in New York City. I met him in Edinburgh, and we both had. He was, I think, a little more stand-up-y, but also very storytelling at the time. And we just had the same like routine where we would pass each other at the same time of day every day. And it would just the conversation was just like, how'd it go? How you
Yeah.
doing? Oh, you had 3 audience members? I had 2. Good job. And it was just, kind of yeah, like just that brothers in arms, the
Mm-hmm.
camaraderie of being in such an intense festival. And I can say that Gabe now, his one-man show is now off Broadway, and it has in New York and has been renewed at the end of every cycle when he's supposed to be done. There's more demand, and he does a whole new run.
That's great.
Um, and this is at the Soho Playhouse, which is where I used to work. So I'm like, go Gabe.
Yeah.
And I know a few people like that who have transitioned from, you know, mics and club shows, bringer shows to now it's my show. These are my ticket sales, and if I have anybody else on my show, it's because they're opening for me, right?
Yeah.
So I think some of those conversations at first have just been, camaraderie and support and, how to go and some of that. But yeah, I would say too, sometimes if they're a good friend or if there's someone that you really like, maybe it's like, hey, have you been on this show? Oh, you haven't? Okay, let me hit you up with so and so. Right. So it's a bit of that connecting, not all the time. Again, if they're a good friend and if they like you, you don't want to be too pushy. Sometimes that really turns people off. But also you don't get what you don't ask for. So it's
True.
like, if you want to be on a show, like go ask to be on a show. And so the show I'm going to tonight is primarily to go see this woman, see her show, but also I want to be in that theater. And so I'm going to I've already, had emails with the people that run the theater. So I also have a little motive there too,
Of course. Yeah.
so that I can be on stage, I can be in that theater. Um, so yeah, I think it just depends. I mean, again, most of my friends are maybe more creatives, but are not comedians.
Who's the funniest person you've ever met?
Mm. Oh man. There's been a handful. There are some people in my life that I can't even look at them without laughing.
I
It's
love that. I love that.
There was this guy, his name's Ryland Warner. I think that's his last name. I haven't seen him in a while. We did improv together in college at CU Boulder, and he was the funniest guy. And I was on his podcast a couple years ago because he does a podcast as well. So he's brought that humor to the mic, in his own way. There just been some people that they just exude this silliness, right? This silliness, and nothing is ever serious with them. So I would say there's a handful of people that I can't. I'm like, I know I have to, make sure I go to the bathroom. I don't have a full bladder, so I can be around you and laugh freely and not, piss my pants because
Yeah.
people are just they exude that.
What makes them funny to you?
Honestly, I think just the silliness, the
Mm.
like the some of the wittiness, some of the
Wittiness.
how quick and unexpected something is. If they respond to a situation with something that is quick and unexpected, that makes me laugh. Something that is silly, if they make themselves look stupid, I love that. And that
Yeah.
comes from my like idiot, like I love when people are just like, I'm gonna be stupid. And I'm like,
Yeah.
because to me that's way funnier than someone just a nameless faceless person doing stand up.
Mm.
I like that kind of conversational silliness, and if you bring that to stage, that's awesome. I think it's kind of hard to do that for me personally. It's been hard
Yeah.
to put full personality to stage without putting on some of that like comedian persona that I think makes a lot of things less funny.
Yeah, I you know what, you hit on something. I think it's the wittiness and the quick, like the timing. Like I have a few friends who are like they're just on top of it. You say anything to them, or like the jabs that they throw at you, they're hilarious, and they're not trying. And I would like, I'm trying to like dig into it. Like, how did you come up with that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just like just comes to me. That's really funny. I don't like when people try too hard to be funny. That always
Mm.
bothers me. But it just feels like natural. Like I have some friends who have like very irreverent humor. Like it's probably not good to say publicly, but when they say it, it's like it's like wow. I probably shouldn't be laughing at that, but it is pretty funny, type of stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
yeah.
guess what people find funny is different between people. Some people like that very deadpan humor. Some people like physical comedy and stuff. But I've known a few people in my life who I thought were like incredibly funny, but I don't think they would ever be comedians. Like I think it would like almost stunt their funniness to have to like
Right.
formalize it.
Right. Unless they could find a way to be fully that on
Yeah.
stage. And that's been something that my dad, who loves comedy, has said to me is he says, you're almost, a little bit funnier in person than you are on stage. And that was,
Exactly.
something that he says, oh, if you could just take that thing that you're doing right now and put it up there. And that has been a huge revelation for me in my career because when you start doing it, you can't help but try to be a good fit. You can't help but try to fit in. So if you see a lot of dry comedians, you see a lot of people trying to sound like Mitch Hedberg,
Yeah.
you're going to start to sound like that. You're going to start to do that. And so I totally like at the time I think I was kind of like, but then when I matured, I was like, oh, that's that's what I need to do. And so I stopped trying. Honestly, I stopped trying so hard. I
Yeah.
used to like meticulously memorize my sets, just down to every punctuation, everything. And it wasn't until I got some feedback from a blind comedian in Denver, maybe like a year or two after I started. He was like, "Are you reading off of a page?" As that's what it sounds like. And I'm like, oh God.
That may be a low point when a blind comedian tells you.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, you have a point. And I don't think it was really until I got to New York and I started to realize the more like quote unquote mistakes I made on
Mm-hmm.
stage, the funnier I was. Like the day I fell off stage, funniest show I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like funniest thing because because of how I reacted and how I got up. And I said, wow, you didn't help me. You didn't help me. You
Exactly.
didn't help me. I started playing with the audience because this whole show was about how I almost died. And then
Yeah.
I fell off stage into this backdrop that was only held by like these little chairs.
Oh
And it was,
no.
this big piece of wood, and it kind of did one of these, and it was swaying, and I was looking up, and I was like, I'm gonna die. So I obviously had to react to that, but I do remember when I first started and things would derail me. I couldn't deal with it. Like I did a set one time in a coffee shop. It was an open mic, but there was a drunk person. They stumbled in and they were so unruly that the owner came in, took his chair, and just yanked it from under him
Yeah.
and he fell to the ground. And instead of like saying something about that or
Yeah.
playing that or letting it even impact me, I just like went to the next thing.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it too, is just experience, is just, you get funnier with learning. Okay, what can go wrong will always go wrong.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to be perfect and not make a mistake, why don't you just let yourself make mistakes?
Yeah. Totally. I don't know if you remember, it was a while ago when we had this episode, you and I, but you told this story about, I think it was like some guy you were into. And you're looking at me, you're like, I don't remember the story, but it was hilarious.
Wasn't
And it
memorable.
was a whole thing. You were visiting this person, and then you had this weekend together, And then so you
Oh no,
always coming back.
there it is. Found it.
The roller was like, there it is. And I thought that story was so funny because it was, you were very vulnerable and raw in the story. Like a lot of people tell those stories and they like skip over kind of the messiness of it. You went full messy. You were like,
Well,
this is what happened, you know? And I think that's what like your dad was saying is like, you're funnier in real life when you tell that type of stuff and you just let it rip, you know? And the
mm-hmm.
details of that story was made it really funny to me because you really thought something was happening and nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. I remember it like yesterday.
Yes, yes, that's so funny. Wow. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. Yeah, I think I probably have also blocked that because I'm in a very healthy, happy relationship now.
Well, that's good. Good for you because that other one did not sound like that. It was like,
Not meant to be that
no,
to be.
but that was really like that caught me. I said, now that's a great story because there's a lot of I like details in stories, and it was very messy,
Mhm.
and you never shied away from it. And I think that's the key to a great story is not to like take people into the story and then go, well, I got to take the plane back up because this part is probably not good to tell. You're like, no, I'm gonna just tell it, you know.
Yeah, I think that also comes from just letting go of my need to uh please people. I would say,
Mm,
especially like my mother. Like my first book is riddled with sorry mom, sorry mom, sorry mom,
mm,
like because I'm so afraid of like, her feelings being impacted whatsoever. And I think it's helped that I've just been like, okay, well, yeah, let's get into the messiness because it's full on,
yeah.
it's fully there to the point where now I have a chapter in my new book called Honest Reviews of Guys I Fucked.
There you go.
So we are leaving nothing out of that chapter.
That's a great title.
No one will be spared. Not a
No
single
one.
young man will make it out alive.
I got to read that book, man. I'm telling you. Wow. Now, see, that's good right there. And I think because everybody has dated and done all these things, and it's like everybody is like, oh, I'm too proper to not talk about the details of my failed things. It's like, no, a lot of people talk, have had a lot of failures in relationships and have done some things they probably didn't want, they shouldn't have done. Like, but see, that's what I loved about that story is like you thought it was definitely going somewhere. And this dude was like, no. And it was like funny, even though it was not nice, it was funny at the same time. And people
That is
identify
just
with that.
right. That is kind of my brand is like thinking everything will go off without a hitch.
Yeah.
And it so comically goes the other way.
Right.
Because really and I think that's almost the whole point of this book and the show and some of the work that I do is like figuring out that it's okay to fail and it's okay that you were naive. It's okay that
Yeah.
you thought it was a thing and then it turned out to not be. It's okay you thought it was a migraine. It was a brain bleed.
Yeah.
Like these are very different things that are happening, but acknowledging, yeah, that you were so off. You were so completely off base. I think that's like my brand pretty
Yeah.
much. And what else did you say? Full messy.
Yeah. Full messy. I do this with people all the time. Like I'll be training clients and stuff, and they'll tell me a story about something, and then like they just like abruptly end it. I'm like, whoa, 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 what happened? Like, what's the details? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but why couldn't you tell me about it? I want to know all the dirty stuff. Like they're like, really? I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, give me the juice, man. Like,
Yeah, I think that just, we think people are judging us,
yeah,
right? But actually, we feel more heard and more
yeah,
validated. I cried on a Zoom call last night. I was not in a good place last night.
yeah, yeah,
And it was an artist call where we get on once a week and we talk about what we did that week.
yeah,
And I did jack shit. And I showed up in my fuzzy robe, my hood was pulled up, my little like koala ears,
Oh,
and they're like, "What's going on over there?" And I just started weeping. And they were actually like, "Thank you."
yeah,
They said, "Thank you for showing us that." Because that opened up a full conversation that was actually really important for us to do that could have been totally glossed over because,
yeah,
okay, well, I wrote 5 times this week and blah blah blah, like we could have
right.
just done that, but instead it was like, oh, I feel that, that's how I, like it was a
Yeah.
much better real connection that we made because I just openly sobbed.
So you're just showing up to Zoom calls weeping now? Is that where this has gone?
That's the secret.
You're definitely going full messy now. You're not even talking. You're just showing up and just weeping. Like,
And I was just in my robe. So anyway, I think maybe that comes from a place of I felt very safe. I felt
yeah,
like, okay, I'm gonna do this today. I'm not gonna bow out of this and just not do it. I'm gonna show
yeah,
up. This is how I'm showing up.
yeah,
This is how I am today. And I try to do that on stage too, if
yeah,
I'm just like really not feeling it that day. I gotta let you know. Like I gotta tell you, like I had to like, shoot a Red Bull backstage because
yeah,
I haven't slept in 3 weeks. Like if that's where I am, that's where I am. And
yeah,
so I try not to hide that because it's just not gonna be authentic. It's not gonna produce
yeah,
anything. And B, it's just gonna connect more with the audience.
yeah. I love that kind of inner monologue becoming the outer monologue commentary. And honestly, nothing says giving up more than wearing a robe on a Zoom call. I've actually gotten into wearing robes. I wear a robe. I resisted it for like 2 decades. Now I'm wearing a robe every night, bare chested,
Yes.
because I feel like more of a man. I'm not joking.
Yes. You got to.
Sit by a
Life is too.
fireplace. Yes, with a
uh,
cocktail. I'm like, I feel like the Dos Equis guy right now. I'm just like a real man in his 40s.
I
Maybe I'll
love
be
it.
crying on a Zoom call soon. That's my
Yes.
next move. Like, ah.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
That is great. I love the full messy. Keep being messy. And you know what's great about this, Mimi? I met you. I mean, that was got to be like a year or two, something like that. And we're going to be in the same state unless you move back to California at some point. But I'm looking forward to meeting you. Seriously, it's going to be exciting. And I may wear my robe to the show.
Oh, we should have a rope party. We'll bring our little cocktails. We'll get
I
all cozy
know.
robes on. Oh, it'd be so fun. I
Sounds
can't
like
wait.
amazing, right? All right, tell all the people, let's give them the roll call, how they can connect with Mimi.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. You can find me on the social medias at Mimi Hayes Brain. You can find my website, mimihays.com. My first book is available on my website. It is called I'll Be Okay. It's Just a Hole in My Head. My podcast is called Mimi and the Brain. My TED Talk is called what is it called? Laughter is not the best medicine. That
Mm-hmm.
is on YouTube, TEDx, Cherry Creek Women. And yeah, hopefully I'll get this next book out in the next few years. We'll see.
Next few years.
I, I'm shopping for an agent slash
Ooh.
publisher that could do fancy things with it. So
Mm.
if anyone listening is one of those people, you just roll right into the DMs. You can just come right through.
Right
Uh,
through.
yes. So that is all the things I can currently think of, but I'm sure you will have very thorough show notes for
You have
everybody.
no clue how thorough these show notes are going to be. I'm using AI now. I'm using Chat GPT AI.
Yes,
So
you
there's
are.
going to be chapters, and I'm giving very little effort into making the show notes. It's just going to be AI driven. It's the honest truth.
We love it. We love it.
You know, Mimi, you're awesome. And I'll speak to you next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.